The suburbs have a sound, you know? It's not silence. It's the gentle, rhythmic whoosh of a distant sprinkler, the polite whir of a neighbor's electric lawn mower 3 streets over, and the occasional mournful coo of a dove that sounds just as bored as everyone else. Our street is the king of this beige-colored decaf latte in a travel mug quiet. Our houses are all slight variations of modern farmhouse, which means they're painted in 50 shades of gray, taupe, or, if you're a real wild card, a daring grage. This was my kingdom, and I, its simple, unbothered king. My throne wasn't inside the house. It was a weather-beaten Adirondack chair on my front porch, my happy place. It was a Saturday, a perfect 72-degree, low-humidity Saturday. I had a coffee in my hand, black as a void, and the grill was preheating for a long, slow afternoon of smoking some ribs. I was a man at peace with the universe. And I had a new welcome mat. It wasn't much. It was a simple choir mat, but it spoke to my soul. In cheerful, blocky letters it said, "Hope you brought tacos and beer." It was, in my humble opinion, the pinnacle of suburban comedy. It was functional, it was friendly, and it set expectations. My wife, Sarah, stepped out onto the porch, holding her own mug, which probably had some green tea leaf dirt water in it. She looked down at the mat and sighed the sigh of a woman who has been married to me for 12 years. "You really think that's funny, huh, Dave?" "Funny?" I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Sarah, it's not just funny. It's an entry-level screening process. It filters out the boring people. If they show up with a Jell-O salad instead, we know not to let them in." "You're an idiot," she said, but she was smiling. "You just like that it gives you an excuse to talk about tacos." "A man needs a code," I said sagely, staring out at the identical gray houses. "Mine involves seasoned meat and corn tortillas." She rolled her eyes and was about to go back inside when a shadow fell across the porch. It was followed by a knock. Oh, not a knock. A rapping. You can tell a lot from a knock. There's the delivery guy knock, which is just a frantic 3-second thud, thud, thud before they sprint back to the truck. There's the neighbor knock, a polite tap-a-tap, tap as they peek through the glass. This was not one of those. This was a sharp, percussive, self-important knock. Knock, knock. This was the knock of someone who has measured your lawn and found it wanting. This was a summoning the manager knock. Sarah looked at me. "Are we expecting a summons?" "I don't know," I muttered. "I paid the water bill." I put down my mug and opened the door. She was standing there, almost vibrating with purpose. She was maybe 50, dressed in a head-to-toe Lululemon jogging outfit that had clearly never been jogged in. It was immaculate. She wore a visor, despite the porch being in full shade, and held, I swear to God, a clipboard. Where do they get the clipboards? Is there a disgruntled homeowner starter pack I'm unaware of? "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was like a knife cutting through a cheap steak. "Are you the resident?" "I am," I said, leaning against the doorframe. I gestured to the mat. "I'd offer you a taco, but you're a little early and empty-handed." She did not laugh. She didn't even blink. Her eyes just scanned my face, my t-shirt, and then zeroed in on the mat at my feet like it had just insulted her mother. "I'm Brenda from 412, she announced, as if 412 was a principality, and she was its reigning duchess. "I'm on the Neighborhood Beautification Committee." "Oh," I said, trying to sound impressed. "Congrats. I didn't know we had one of those. or a neighborhood. I thought this was just a collection of houses that look the same. And your mat, she continued, ignoring me, has been flagged. I looked down. Flagged? Did it set off an alarm? Is it a Russian spy mat? It's not compliant, she snapped, with the neighborhood's aesthetic guidelines. This was new to me. Aesthetic guidelines? Brenda, my house is the same color as your house, and his house, and… Wait, do we even have an HOA? We didn't. That was the beauty of this place. It was the suburbs without the "you can't park your car in your own driveway" fascism. Her eyes narrowed into tiny, angry slits. It's an unwritten rule, which all respectful homeowners choose to follow. This is a family-friendly street. Your mat is… tacky. Tacky. Ouch. And, she added, puffing up, it implies you're running a tavern. This broke my brain. A tavern? I repeated. I looked back at Sarah, who was trying to hide behind the door. Brenda, I wish. Do you know what the profit margins are on a good tavern? No, I'm just a guy who likes tacos. And beer, as the mat clearly states. It's inappropriate, she said, making a sharp little check mark on her clipboard. It lowers the tone of the street. I'll expect to see it removed by Monday. Have a blessed day. She didn't wait for a reply. She just spun on her perfect white $200 sneakers and marched off, her back as rigid as a 2x4. I closed the door slowly. The silence in the entryway was thick. Well, I said, I guess the tavern at 420 is closed. Sarah came out from behind the door, her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, Dave, she's a lot. A lot? She's a one-woman beige brigade. She flagged my mat. What does that even mean? Just get a new mat, Dave, Sarah said, already heading to the kitchen. Get one that says welcome or has a duck on it. It's not worth it. I walked back out to the porch, my coffee now lukewarm. I looked at the mat. Hope you brought tacos and beer. It was so innocent. So pure. And it was me, and this woman, this Brenda, had called it tacky. She had threatened my constitutional right to request tacos via doormat. Sarah was right, of course. It wasn't worth it. The logical adult thing to do was to go to Target, buy a boring mat with a pineapple on it, and move on with my life. It was the path of least resistance. It was the suburban way. But I just couldn't. This wasn't about the mat. It was about the principle. This is America. I should be able to politely, passively, and humorously request tacos on my own porch without a clipboard-wielding despot trying to shut me down. She called it a tavern. A tavern! I looked at my mat. Then I looked at the boring, gray concrete walkway. Then I looked past that, down the long, long driveway. All of it gray. All of it boring. All of it Brenda approved. A slow, beautiful, terrible idea began to form. It started as a flicker, and then, in a rush of petty adrenaline, it bloomed into a full-on, high-definition Technicolor masterpiece. She thinks this is tacky? I muttered to the bored-sounding dove. She has no idea what tacky looks like. She hasn't even seen tacky yet. I walked back inside, a new spring in my step. The ribs were forgotten. Sarah, I called out, pulling my laptop off the counter. Where's the credit card? Why? She called back, her voice suspicious. Are you ordering a tavern sign? Something like that, I said, my fingers already flying across the keyboard. Something so much better. Monday morning. I was up at 7, coffee in hand, a man on a mission. Sarah had gone to work, still convinced I was just going to buy a bigger, more obnoxious mat. Oh, my sweet, naive wife. I wasn't on Amazon. I wasn't on Etsy. I was deep diving into the local business directory. I skipped home and garden. I skipped landscaping. I went straight to event rentals. The first place I called was Fancy Functions. Fancy Functions, this is Tiffany, a perky voice answered. Hi, Tiffany. I have a unique request. I need a red carpet. Oh, lovely. For a wedding? We have aisle runners in 10 and 20-foot lengths. White or off-white? No, Tiffany. I need a red carpet, like Oscar Knight red. And I don't want an aisle runner. I want more. More? I don't understand. Never mind, Tiffany. I hung up. The second place was Rent a Tent. They had one 15-foot red runner, but it was kind of stained. Pass. Then I found it. A1 Event Rentals. The name had all the class I was looking for. It sounded like a place that had seen some things. I dialed. One ring, and then a sound like a 1970s bar ashtray achieved sentience and learned to speak. Yeah, A1, Bob speaking. Hi, Bob, I said, my heart racing. I have a unique request. I need a red carpet. Aisle runner? He grunted. How many feet? We got white, too. No, Bob, not an aisle runner. I need a red carpet. The real deal. Plush. And I don't want just a little bit. I want all of it. How long is your longest one? There was a long pause, filled with what sounded like a combination of wheezing and suppressed laughter. We got a 50-footer, Bob said, his voice now laced with professional curiosity. A 50 by 4. It's the Hollywood package. Who's the celebrity? Me, Bob, I said, feeling a surge of power. Me and my neighbors. I need it to run from my front door, down the walkway, and all the way down my driveway to the street. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a slow, rattling, beautiful cackle that sounded like gravel in a blender. To the street? He choked out. Kid, what did you do? I had a tacky welcome mat, Bob. A tacky? Oh, that's rich, he coughed. That's beautiful. You got a neighbor, don't you? One of those. She's on the beautification committee, Bob. Say no more, he roared. I know the type. I'll be there Wednesday. And don't you worry. I'm gonna bring the good one, the Plushkin, quarter-inch pile. It's a beauty. You want stanchions? I froze. Stanchions? What are... The little gold poles, he said, his voice dropping like he was letting me in on a secret. With the red velvet ropes. To, keep the riffraff off the carpet. I had to sit down. I put my head in my hands. It was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. Bob, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Yes. I want all the stanchions you have. Every last one. You got it, kid, he said. The tavern package. I'll write it up. Wait, how did you... I like your style, kid. See you Wednesday. 10 a.m. sharp. He hung up. I sat there, in the silence of my beige kitchen, a grin spreading across my face that was so wide it hurt my ears. Monday. She wanted it gone by Monday. I'd missed her deadline, but on Wednesday, beautification was coming. Wednesday. 9:55 a.m. I was on the porch, coffee in hand, vibrating like a tuning fork. I'd taken the day off work. This was, I felt, a personal development day. At 10 a.m. on the dot, a truck that could only be described as behemoth turned onto our quiet, gray street. It was an old, battered box truck, and on the side, In peeling red letters, it said, A1 Event Rentals. We've got you covered, and fenced and floored. It backed into my driveway with a series of hydraulic groans and a piercing beep, beep, beep that echoed off the identical houses. I saw curtains twitch. Oh yes. The show was beginning. The passenger door creaked open, and out hopped Bob. He was magnificent. He was a short, stocky man in a greasy A1 polo shirt, a lit and unfiltered cigarette dangling from his lips, and a tape measure on his belt. He was followed by two college-aged kids who looked like they were deeply regretting their summer job. "Morning, kid," Bob barked, squinting at my house. "This is the tavern, huh? Nice, clean, no character. I see the problem." "Bob," I said, shaking his hand, "it's a pleasure." "All right, boys," he yelled at the kids. "Let's unroll the Hollywood. And be gentle, she's a delicate flower." This was a production. They yanked a massive, sausage-shaped roll of fabric out of the truck. It hit the driveway with a thud that shook my windows. Brenda's front door opened. Just a crack. I saw her visor-clad head peek out. "Showtime," I muttered. "All right, Dave," Bob yelled, pulling out his tape measure. "You're the director. Where do you want the wow factor to start?" "Right here, Bob," I said, pointing at my front door. "I want it to start at the tacos and beer mat. That's the VIP entrance." "I love it," Bob cackled. "You heard him, fellas. Right up to the door." They unrolled it, and oh, it was glorious. It was a vivid, obnoxious, beautiful river of red. It wasn't a mat. It was a statement. It was the color of a 1950s lipstick, a stop sign, a matador's cape. Against the drab, gray, beige verse of our street, it looked like a wound. They rolled it down the walkway. They rolled it down the driveway. They kept rolling. It lapped gently over the curb and kissed the hot asphalt of the street itself. It was 50 feet of pure, unadulterated plush pile spite. I heard a sound that wasn't a bird or a sprinkler. It was a high-pitched "Eeeeee!" Brenda came flying out of 412. She wasn't marching now. She was sprinting, her clipboard held in front of her like a shield. "What is this?" she shrieked, skidding to a halt on the sidewalk, careful not to touch the crimson invader. "What are you doing?" I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. "Good morning, Brenda. Just replacing my welcome mat. You said the old one was tacky, and you were so right. I mean, look at it. Pitiful." I nudged the taco mat with my toe. "This," I gestured grandly to the river of red. "This feels much more appropriate. More welcoming. Wouldn't you agree?" "This is a monstrosity," she sputtered. "It's on the sidewalk. That's a violation. That's a public... Ah, Bob said, stepping forward, his cigarette wagging. "Actually, ma'am, it's a temporary, non-fixed installation. No different from a kid's lemonade stand or one of them. What do you call them? Those bouncy castles." Brenda looked at Bob like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Who are you?" "Bob, A1 Event Rentals." He handed her a grimy business card. "And it's fully compliant with A-Day regulations for walkway-based fabric installations. I checked." He turned and gave me a massive, smoky wink. I had to turn away. I think I was in love with Bob. You're ruining the neighborhood." Brenda was almost in tears. "Brenda, I'm beautifying it," I said, my voice full of false sincerity. "This is for the Neighborhood Beautification Committee, remember? Look how beautiful this is. It's got color, it's got passion. Now, if you'll excuse me," I turned to Bob. It's time. Bring out the stanchions." "The stanchions!" Bob bellowed to his crew. The two kids started unloading shiny, gold-colored poles from the truck. They set them up, one by one, every 6 feet, all the way down both sides of the driveway. Then, with a flourish, they snapped the plush, red velvet ropes into place. Click, click, click. It was done. My driveway was no longer a driveway. It was a VIP line. It was the entrance to the hottest, most exclusive tavern in the county. Brenda just stood there, her mouth opening and closing, making little goldfish sounds of pure, unadulterated rage. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers were jabbing at the screen. "Oh, good," I said to Bob. "She's calling her friends." "Nah, kid," Bob said, admiring his work. "That's a 911 call. I know one when I see one." It took 20 minutes, 20 glorious minutes, where I just stood at the top of my red-carpeted driveway, a king on his velvet throne, sipping my coffee. The A1 truck had rumbled away, Bob giving me a final, knowing nod. "Call me if you need anything, kid. We do lighting, too." Then the patrol car rolled up. It didn't use its sirens, just glided silently to the curb, its lights flashing. It parked right behind the part of the carpet that was touching the street. A police officer got out. He was a big guy, with a neatly trimmed mustache and a utility belt that looked like it weighed more than I did. He put on his hat, adjusted his belt, and just stared. He had the look of a man who's seen a kid's birthday party end in a fistfight. A man who has had to tell someone, with a straight face, not to microwave tinfoil. He looked tired, bone-tired. He looked at the 50-foot red carpet. He looked at the 20 gold stanchions. He looked at the red velvet ropes. He looked at Brenda, who was vibrating on her lawn like a tuning fork. And then he looked at me, standing proudly at the top, next to my tacos and beer mat. He pinched the bridge of his nose. He let out a sigh that seemed to come from his very soul. It was a sigh of existential despair. "Folks," he said, his voice flat, "it's 10:30 on a Wednesday. What am I looking at here?" Brenda was on him in a second. "Officer, thank you for coming. This maniac," she pointed at me, "has installed this thing. It's a public nuisance. It's blocking things. It's a fire hazard. It's red." The cop turned to me. I gave him a polite, neighborly wave. "Officer Miller," I said, reading his name tag. "How are you?" "Name's Dave, 4-20. Can I offer you a taco? I'm just welcoming people to my tavern, as Brenda here calls it." Officer Miller stared at me. "Son, I'm going to ask you one time. Why is there a red carpet down your driveway?" "It's a welcome mat, officer," I explained, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "My old one," I pointed to the taco mat, "was deemed tacky by the Neighborhood Beautification Committee, aka Brenda. So I upgraded. I wanted something more in line with the prestige of the street, you know? Is there a law against welcoming extravagantly?" Miller looked at Brenda. "Ma'am, is this thing on his property?" "Well, yes," Brenda sputtered. "But it's visible from the street. It's an eyesore. It's attracting attention." Officer Miller turned back to me. He looked at the carpet. He looked at the stanchions. He actually walked over and nudged one with his boot. Clink. "That's generally how property works, ma'am," Miller said, his voice strained. "If it's visible. Sir," he looked back at me, "as long as this isn't a permanent structure, And those poles are just weighted, right? They're not cemented in? Oh, heavens no, I said. Purely temporary. A1 Event Rentals. Right. As long as it's not a permanent structure, and it's not blocking the public sidewalk, which, he noted, it looks like you've carefully lined, there's no law being broken. See, Brenda? I said, beaming. Fully compliant. But, she was losing it. Ma'am, Officer Miller said, and for the first time there was a hard edge to his voice. This is not a police matter. It's a fabric matter. Please don't call 911 again unless the attacks someone. He turned to me, and I saw, just for a second, the shadow of a smile under his mustache. Have a good day, sir, he said, with just a hint of mockery. Try to keep the tavern under control. You're welcome here any time, Officer Miller, I called after him. You're a VIP. He just shook his head, got in his car, and drove away. Brenda stood there, defeated, her clipboard hanging limply at her side. She looked at me. She looked at the carpet. Then she turned and marched back into 412, slamming the door so hard I thought her "Live, Laugh, Love" sign might fall off the wall. I stood there for a long time. The street was quiet again, just me, my coffee, and 50 feet of glorious velvet-roped victory. It's one thing to have a 50-foot red carpet. It's another thing to live with one. Within 2 hours, the tavern, as it was now officially known, was a local landmark. People were slowing down their cars. Not just glancing. I'm talking full stop, roll down the window, what the hell is that gawking? A teenager on a skateboard rolled down, filmed the whole thing on his phone, and nearly crashed into the mailbox. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Dave, what did you do? I beautified, honey, just like Brenda wanted. Gary from 315 just texted me a picture of our driveway. He just sent the popcorn emoji. What did you do? I'll explain tonight. Love you. The neighborhood Facebook group, which was usually just a cesspool of lost cat, and "Was that a gunshot or fireworks?" posts, absolutely exploded. Mildred, 71, 419. I think it's festive. Looks like the circus is in town. Chad, 34, new build on the next street. This is hurting my property value. Does anyone know a good lawyer? This is not the aesthetic I was promised. Someone named Taco Lover 88. So, what time do the tacos start? The best part was my neighbor Gary from across the street. Gary is a good dude. He's a live and let live kind of guy whose primary hobbies are his smoker and his riding lawnmower. Around 5 p.m., he wandered over, a beer in each hand. He didn't use the sidewalk. He walked right up the middle of the street, stopped at the curb, and just stared. Dude, he said, his voice full of awe. Dude. Gary, I said, emerging from my house with a fresh beer of my own. Welcome to the tavern. Walk the velvet. You're a VIP. He let out a short, sharp laugh and stepped onto the carpet, walking between the ropes. He made it all the way to the top. Here, he said, handing me one of the beers. This is art. This is pure, uncut, Class A spite. It's beautiful. She said my mat was tacky, I said, clinking his bottle. She's gonna have an aneurysm. You know that, right? One can only hope, Gary. One can only hope. We stood there, two suburban kings surveying our domain, and then Gary nudged me. Dude, don't look now, but your #1 fan is documenting. I looked over. In the front window of 412, there was Brenda. And she wasn't just looking. She was holding a camera. Not a phone camera. A big, black, professional-looking camera with a telephoto lens. The kind you see at NFL games. Click, whir, click. She was taking pictures. Of me. Of Gary. Of the carpet. Of the stanchions. That, Gary whispered, is creepy as hell. That's not creepy, Gary, I said, taking a long pull of my beer. That's escalation. She's building a file. She's gathering evidence. Evidence of what? Excessive welcoming? I don't know, I said, but if she's escalating, I guess I have to too. The carpet, it turned out, was not all weather. I learned this at 6 o'clock a.m. the next morning. I was woken up not by my alarm, but by a sound. A rhythmic, irritating I was confused. It wasn't my sprinkler day. I stumbled out of bed and looked out the window, and my blood ran cold. Brenda was testing her sprinklers, the ones on the edge of her property, right next to my driveway. And they were testing in a way that just happened to send a high-velocity arc of reclaimed water directly onto the last 10 feet of my beautiful red carpet. The end of the carpet was soaked. It was dark, heavy, and sad-looking. I ran downstairs and burst out the front door, still in my boxers and a t-shirt. "Brenda!" I yelled. She was standing on her porch, in a bathrobe, holding a coffee mug. She gave me a sickly sweet smile. "Oh, good morning, Dave. Just running a test. Have to make sure the beautification stays hydrated." Another wave of water slapped onto the velvet. I stood there, barefoot on the dry part of the carpet, clenching my fists. This was a low blow. A damp blow. Sarah's head appeared at the door. "Dave, just come inside. It's just water. It'll dry." "It's not just water, Sarah," I whisper-shouted. "It's a message. It's desecration. You don't dampen the velvet. That's a declaration of war. You're going to start a war in your boxers? Come on, you're scaring the dog." I retreated, but I was fuming. I spent the next hour trying to fix it. I got towels, I got a leaf blower. I was on my hands and knees trying to dry this thing out, while played on a loop, a soundtrack to my humiliation. The leaf blower just kind of moved the water around, making the plush pile look matted. The irony. Defeated, I went inside, showered, and sat at the kitchen table, stewing. "This is unacceptable," I muttered into my coffee. "What, the sprinklers?" Sarah asked. "No, this vulnerability. My welcome is exposed to the elements, to her." I pulled out my phone. "Who are you calling?" Sarah asked, her eyes narrowing. "Don't you dare call the cops about sprinklers, Dave. Officer Miller will arrest you." "I'm not calling the cops, honey. I'm calling a professional." I dialed. "Yeah, A1. Bob speaking." "Bob," I said, my voice grim. "It's Dave. We have a situation." "What's up, kid? Stanchion fall over?" "It's a water-based situation, Bob. An aerial assault." There was a pause, a thoughtful wheeze. "The neighbor? Sprinklers?" "You're a prophet, Bob. Happens more than you'd think. Say no more, kid. You need the canopy." The canopy? Yeah. You can't have a VIP entrance without a canopy. Protects them from the rain, the sun, the reclaimed water. It's the full step and repeat. I got a 10x10 white one. It'll look real classy. Creates a, whatchamacallit, a grand arrival at the curb. "Bob, you're a poet." "I'll be there in an hour. We'll show her what beautification really means." 1 hour. That's all it took. The A1 truck was back, beeping its glorious song of war as it backed up to my driveway again. Brenda's sprinklers, which had been running for a solid hour and a half, I was already composing my complaint to the water board, suddenly shut off. Her door opened. She saw the truck. Her face, which had been so smug, crumpled like a wet paper bag. Bob and his 2-man and very tired crew hopped out. "All right, boys," Bob bellowed, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "The tavern is upgrading. Let's get the grand arrival package up, right at the curb." They were efficient. In 10 minutes, they had a professional-grade, 10x10 white pop-up canopy assembled. It was the kind you see at art fairs. They positioned it perfectly over the end of the driveway, its legs on the sidewalk, creating a covered entrance from the street. It was a beautiful, ridiculous white and red carbuncle on the face of our gray street. Brenda was back on her lawn. "A tent? You can't put up a tent. You need a permit. That's a structure." "It's a canopy, Brenda," I yelled back. "It's for the ambiance." She was already on her phone. "Yes, hello? I'd like to report. Yes, 420. He's built a structure on the sidewalk. Yes, a tent." I just sighed and went to get my coffee. I was waiting on the porch when Officer Miller's car rolled up again. This time he didn't glide. He jerked to a stop. He didn't even get out of the car. He just rolled down his passenger side window and stared at the new canopy. He stared at me. He stared at Brenda, who was waving her clipboard at him from her lawn. "Dave!" he yelled, and his voice was so full of exasperation it could have powered a small city. I walked down the red carpet, under the velvet ropes, all the way to his car. "Morning, officer. Lovely day for a—" "Don't. Just don't. Is it a tent, Dave?" "It's a canopy, officer," I said cheerfully. "To protect the welcome mat from the elements. You know, sun fading, water damage, general wear and tear. It's an investment." "It's a tent!" Brenda shrieked from across the street. Miller put his head on his steering wheel for a solid 5 seconds. I heard a muffled, "I hate this street." He lifted his head. "Brenda!" he yelled, and I saw a vein throbbing in his neck. "It's a pop-up canopy. It's not illegal. Go home. Go inside." He looked at me. "Dave, so help me God, don't make me come back here today." "Wouldn't dream of it, officer," I said. He just stared at me, his eyes dead. Then he rolled up his window and sped off. I felt good. I felt great, but something was missing. The grand arrival package felt undefended. It needed bouncers. I told Sarah I was going to the hardware store. I did not go to the hardware store. I went to a party and used car supply store I'd driven past 1,000,000 times. 20 minutes later, I was back. The cashier's look of profound confusion was worth the price of admission. I carried the 2 long boxes into my garage. I plugged in the fans, and with a mighty F-doomp, they sprang to life. 2 6-foot-tall, inflatable, wavy-arm tube men. One red, one blue. I got a marker. On the red one, I wrote security. On the blue one, I wrote VIPs only. I placed them on either side of the canopy entrance, their plastic hands flapping and flailing in the breeze. Foomp, foomp, foomp. I stepped back. The red carpet, the velvet ropes, the white canopy, and the 2 flailing, chaotic bouncers. My masterpiece was complete. It was perfect. This had become my purpose in life. It was no longer about a mat. It was a lifestyle. My masterpiece was complete, But what is a VIP entrance with no VIPs? What is a tavern with no patrons? I had to throw a party. I spent the next 2 days in a blur of activity. I designed a flyer. Grand opening, the tavern at 420, formerly Dave's driveway. This Saturday, 7 p.m., tacos will be provided. Beer. You know the drill. Walk the red carpet. Meet the security staff. I printed 50 of them. I walked the neighborhood, my neighborhood, and put them in mailboxes. And yes, I saved a special one for Brenda at 412. I didn't just put it in her mailbox. I put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mailed it. Certified. I wanted her to know she was invited. Saturday arrived. Sarah, who had long since crossed the line from mortified to fully on board, had helped me string up bistro lights over the driveway. "If you're going to be an idiot, Dave," she'd said, "you're going to be a classy idiot." At 6:30 p.m., the food truck arrived. I'd found a local one, Taco Lips Now. The owner, a cool guy named Miguel, took one look at the red carpet, the canopy, and the wavy arm bouncers and said, "Man, I don't know what you're promoting, but I am here for it." He parked right on the street next to the canopy. At 7 o'clock p.m., people started to arrive. And they didn't just arrive. They made an entrance. Gary, my man, showed up first, wearing a clip-on tie with his t-shirt. He was holding a clipboard. "Just here to help with the, guest list," he said, dead serious. "Gary, you're my head of security," I said, handing him a beer. Then Mildred from 419 showed up, walking her tiny, trembling poodle. She walked the entire length of the carpet, posing at the end for an imaginary camera. The kids on skateboards came, and they respectfully carried their boards down the velvet. Chad, the property value guy, even showed up, looking confused. "My wife made me come. Are the tacos free?" "For VIPs," I said. He took one. It was magical. My quiet, gray street was alive. People were mingling on my lawn, eating tacos, laughing. The wavy arm guys flapped their approval, their fwoomp, 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 a bizarre rhythm section for the soft jazz I was piping through a Bluetooth speaker. This wasn't a party. It was a community event. I had beautified the neighborhood. Just not in the way Brenda intended. Sarah came up and put her arm around me. She was holding a margarita. "You're a complete, total idiot, Dave," she said, smiling. "I know," I said, kissing her. "Taco?" "Absolutely." The sun was setting. The bistro lights glowed. The red carpet looked impossibly plush in the twilight. Everything was perfect. And then, she came. The music, a surprisingly smooth jazz vibes playlist, seemed to dip. Gary, standing on the velvet by the canopy, suddenly stiffened. Dave," he called. "We've gotta walk in." Brenda. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't holding a clipboard. She was just there, standing at the end of the driveway, under the canopy, flanked by the 2 flailing inflatable bouncers. She looked small. She took a step onto the carpet, and she just kept walking. She walked past Gary. She walked between the golden stanchions. She walked past my neighbors, who parted like the Red Sea, which, given the carpet, was fitting. She walked all the way up the driveway, right to the front porch where the tacos and beer mat still sat. She stopped, 2 feet in front of me. The party went silent. The only sounds were the fwoomp fwoomp of the bouncers and the sizzle of the taco truck. This, she said, her voice quiet. All of this because of a mat? I looked at her. I looked at the taco in my hand. I looked at the 100-odd feet of velvet, ropes, and lights she'd inspired. No, Brenda, I said, my voice gentle. All of this because you're a terrible neighbor. I held out the taco. But you're a VIP. Taco? She just stared at it. Her face was doing something complicated. It was a mix of rage, confusion, and, was that despair? And then I saw him, a man I had literally never seen before, a pale, thin man who looked like he'd been stored in an attic. He was standing on Brenda's lawn, next to a bush. He was holding a hammer. He reached behind the bush and pulled out a sign. He raised the hammer. Whack, whack, whack. He pounded a "For Sale" sign right into the middle of her perfectly manicured lawn. Brenda's shoulders slumped. "We're moving, you idiot!" she suddenly shrieked, all her quiet dignity gone. "We were trying to sell. We were in escrow." I just did not see this coming. "Wait, you were trying to sell?" I said, lowering my taco. "That's why you were so nuts about the mat?" "It was ruining the curb appeal," she cried. "We had an open house scheduled, and then this circus! Our buyers backed out this morning. They said the neighborhood was unstable." Her husband, the pale man, Gerald, I learned later, just sighed. "Come on, Bren. Let's go inside." You cost us thousands, you tavern owner!" She turned, and for a second I thought she was going to take the taco, but she just stomped off, walking, not on the carpet, but on the thin strip of concrete beside it. She followed her husband into the house, and the door slammed shut. The party was silent for another beat. Then Gary, from the end of the driveway, yelled, "So, does that mean the tacos are all for us?" The spell was broken. The music came back up. The laughter started. I looked at the taco in my hand. "Oh, Brenda," I said to myself. "That's terrible." I took a bite. It was delicious. 6 weeks later, the street was quiet again. Brenda was gone. A moving truck came and spirited them away to, I don't know, a gated community in a state with more rules. The house sold, finally. For less than she wanted, Gary heard. Bob and his crew came for the last time. As they rolled up the carpet, I felt a small, strange pang of sadness. "It was a good run, kid," Bob said, clapping me on the shoulder. He handed me the final invoice. "What's this?" I asked. "Brenda Begone package," he grunted. "Gave you 20% off for, services to the community." The new neighbors moved in on a Saturday. A young couple, maybe in their late 20s. They looked normal. They looked quiet. They looked like they might, like tacos. I watched them carry a few boxes. I went back inside, grabbed a 6-pack from the fridge, and went to the hall closet. I pulled out the original mat. "Hope you brought tacos and beer." I walked across the street, mat under my arm. "Hey there," I said. The new guy, who was built like a linebacker, wiped his brow. "Hey, man. Thanks for, whatever this is." He gestured to my offering. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "I'm Dave, from across the street." "Nice to meet you. I'm Mike. This is Jen." He shook my hand. "Wow, I'm glad to be here. Our last place was crazy. We heard this neighborhood was really quiet." I looked up at the beige houses. I looked at the spot where the red carpet used to be. I looked at Brenda's old house, now a peaceful, non-tacky gray. "Oh, it is, Mike," I said, a smile pulling at my lips. "It really, really is." I held out the mat. "Just One quick question for you guys. Yeah? You guys like tacos?